Thank you for tuning in to the GSMC Sports Podcast presented by the GSMC Sports Network. I am your host, Nelson. I'm finally at home. I miss my home, and I also miss Saquon. I miss him so much, and that is exactly what the first segment is going to be on. We are going to talk about Saquon Barkley and his historic game last night on Sunday Night Football against the Rams. They completely dominated the Rams, and we're going to go ahead and talk about that in this first segment. Then, in the second segment, we're going to talk about Aaron Rodgers and his plans for after this season, because essentially the Jets and their season, it's basically over. From my knowledge and from where I stand, I think their season is over, and I think the fans already know that their season is over. So we're going to talk about that in the second segment. Then in the third segment, I'm just going to quickly recap the scores and the best players from last night's Sunday games and yesterday's Sunday games, because I did some predictions and there were a lot of upsets in this one. I do have to say there were a lot of upsets in this week of NFL football. And there were also a lot of upsets in college football. I might do that in a future segment, but I'm not entirely sure. Then in the fourth segment, we're going to do our weekend recap of the NBA, and we also have a special fifth segment at the end of the fourth segment, so be sure to stay tuned for that if you guys are interested. Before I begin, I'd like to remind everybody that we love to hear what you guys have to say during the show. Whether you guys have a hot take, whether you guys have a burning question, something that you've just been dying to share, we're all ears. If you really want your comment and or question to get noticed, then I recommend using Super Chat. You just click on the $ below the chat box, and you can send in your comments and or donations that way using Super Chat, or you can use the link displayed below the ticker on every single show segment, gsmcspodcast.net. You can send in your comments and or donations that way. It really helps the show. Makes it much more interactive between myself and you guys. And with that out of the way, we can go right ahead and get into this first segment. Sorry, I'm just looking up the stats for this game, because these stats that Saquon Barkley ended with were absolutely historic. And he sets the Eagles franchise record for most rushing yards in a game. He ended with 255 rushing yards. That's 9.8 yards per attempt. He also ended with 2 touchdowns, and in scrimmage yards, he had a total of over 300 yards, because he had the 220 and 255 yards on the ground, along with 47 yards in the air. So he was doing it all in this game. And the Eagles, they ended up winning comfortably 37-20 against the Rams. They really just had no answer for Saquon Barkley, and they also did not have an answer for A.J. Brown, who ended the game with 109 receiving yards and 1 touchdown. Like, these Eagles are incredibly competent, and the fact that they don't even have Devonta Smith in this game, really, like, they could get even better, and they could have probably ran up the score even more if they had him. But again, this was Saquon's game, and I miss him so much. As you guys know, he was a Giant before this season, and now he seems to have found his new home. Well, not really his new home, because if you guys remember him in his college days, he played in Penn State, and so it seems like Pennsylvania might be his home to stay, a team that is actually going to pay him. And this game was it was unbelievable, just what Saquon was able to do in this game. And to open up the first quarter for the Rams started out with a fumble, which the Eagles answered with a field goal. Then the Rams answered that with a touchdown. Both teams exchanged punts. Then the Eagles took another field goal to make the score 6-7. And then after that, then came the touchdowns. So Saquon ended up scoring a touchdown, I believe, on the next drive, where it was a 10-play, 62-yard drive to make the score 13-7. And actually, wait, no, it was A.J. Brown who ended up scoring the first touchdown. Excuse me, that's my bad. Barkley ended up closing the game out with those 2 touchdowns that he had. The Eagles, they turned it over on downs after the Rams punted, and then that was basically the end of the half. So going into the third quarter, that was when the touchdowns started happening, like for both teams. Then Saquon ended up rushing for 70 yards for a touchdown. Then the Rams answered with a touchdown. Then the Eagles answered with another touchdown. The Rams missed a field goal. Then the Eagles showed them how to make a field goal in the next quarter. Then the Rams had to punt. And the Eagles scored another touchdown to seal the win. And the Rams answered back with basically a garbage time touchdown, coming in with an 8-play 68-yard touchdown drive. Again, it was a garbage time touchdown. So the game was really, it was close in the beginning, but then as the this Eagles team, they really seemed like a second half team, because like the scoring wasn't as explosive as it was in the first half, but then once the second half came, then the scoring just came in bunches. So that's a really good sign, in my opinion, because it shows that they're able to close out games and they're able to make the adjustments going into the half, which is something that you sort of need in the postseason. You don't want to. I feel like you would much rather end off the game strong as opposed to starting off the game strong. One of my high school football coaches, he said, it's not how you start, it's how you finish. And the fact that these Eagles, they're capable of having these ridiculous second half performances, and they're able to finish games after not really having a productive first half. It really goes to show you just how talented this team is. And I mean, Jalen Hurts, he's been playing very solid. He didn't have to do much in this game, but he was a game manager, and that was really all that the Eagles needed in order to win in this game, because Saquon is just Saquon, and he's just a freak of nature. Now, he wouldn't do this on the Giants, I will have to admit. He definitely would not do this on the Giants, because the Giants' O-line is nowhere near as competent as the Eagles' O-line. I mean, we all know just how ridiculous the Eagles' offensive line is. I mean, once they get to the 1-yard line, they're almost guaranteed to score because of their tush push, but they don't really need that anymore because Saquon is scoring all of these touchdowns, and it's incredible. And it's so incredible that there's starting to be growing speculation that Saquon Barkley should win the MVP over some of these quarterbacks. And while I personally don't think Saquon should win the MVP, it's mainly because it's more or less a quarterback award. Now, we've seen like several running backs that they try to make a case for being in the MVP conversation, and a lot of the counter arguments for that is the fact that they have a competent O-line. I mean, if you guys remember Jonathan Taylor, he had a fantastic season with the Colts, and a big reason for that was because the Colts O-line was incredible, and it was a big reason why Jonathan Taylor was able to amass all of those yards and produce the way that he was producing. And look at what happened after Jonathan Taylor, like after that year that Jonathan Taylor almost won the MVP. We saw his production sort of hinder a little bit more as the O-line hindered a bit more. So the running back, it's almost always dependent on the O-line, almost always. And that's really a big reason as to why some of these running backs, they aren't winning the MVPs anymore. And quarterbacks, while I will say that quarterbacks, they are indeed dependent on an O-line as well as dependent on receivers. The best quarterbacks are able to usually get the job done without much of a competent receiving core. I mean, we've seen Lamar Jackson play football without a competent receiving core, and then when he actually gets a competent receiving core, he wins the MVP. But the thing is that Lamar has been able to do that without having competent receivers, and he's also been able to do that without having much of a competent O-line and relying on his legs a lot of the time. And that's sort of why he was criticized for some reason for being a running back as opposed to being a quarterback. I never understood that. I mean, I got it. It was very funny, but again, it was if no receivers are open and Lamar can use his legs, why wouldn't he use his legs? It's just common sense. But that, I'm going on a tangent with running backs. But again, this is a award that's reserved for quarterbacks and quarterbacks alone. I don't think Saquon should get this award, but I'm not going to say that he doesn't deserve to be in these kinds of conversations, because this Eagles team, they're 9-2, and a big reason for them being 9-2 is just how amazing Saquon has been in a lot of these games. and this one was just the best one because it broke Eagles' franchise history. He had 146 rushing yards in the last game that he played. He had only 66 rushing yards against the Cowboys, but again, he didn't really need to do much against the Cowboys. They're the Cowboys. But he did have 159 rushing yards against the Jags, and against the Bengals, he had 108 rushing yards, and against my Giants, he had 176 rushing yards. Against the Browns, he had only 47. But so it's like here and there he'll have games where he has less than 100 yards, but more often than not, as you guys can hear from what I'm saying and the stats that I'm reading, more often than not, he ends off the game with over 100 yards. And I'm not even counting the receiving yards that he's able to accumulate in some of these games. These are all just yards on the ground. So imagine if I put all of those yards together. That is just peak performance coming in from this running back. And I mean, they desperately needed that in this game. I mean, I don't think they would have lost to the Rams regardless whether or not Saquon played bad or whether or not he played good, but they did run up the score a lot better with Saquon running the ball the way that he did. It was like the Rams, they just had no answer for him at some points. But that's really all that I have to say in this first segment. Again, I miss him so much. He is a fantastic running back. I cannot believe that the Giants ended up choosing Daniel Jones over Saquon only to cut Daniel Jones after, like, on Friday. It's appalling. It's unbelievable. But with that out of the way, we can go ahead and go into our break, and then we're going into the second segment where I talk about Aaron Rodgers and what's next for him in the future, whether or not he's going to retire, and just, the state of the Jets right now, because as we know, the Jets are a train wreck. So I'll be right back after this short break. Be sure to stay tuned.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign.
I wanna be the greatest. Everybody on the fake shit. I look around and feel like everybody is the fakest. I make this every day and I'm impatient, hoping one day I blow up from the basement. Statement, the top is so vacant. I don't hear shit that I think is amazing. Waiting for my day when I'm playing sold out shows for 1,000 faces. Hey, give me that crown, get in my way and to be put down. It ain't your place, all this my town. If I want that shit, then I'll get it right now. I'm losing it, the noose it fits, some losing shit, a stupid myth. You choose to live or choose to dip, you choose to fight or lose your grip and lose a gift. Oh.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind?
And we are back with the second segment of the GSMC Sports Podcast presented by the GSMC Sports Network. And in this second segment, I am going to be talking about Aaron Rodgers and what's next for him and what's next for the Jets going into the next season. Because from what I can tell, the season is over. And obviously, when the season is over, there's already talks about what's going to happen in the future, especially after the Jets fired their GM. So we're going to go ahead and talk a little bit about that. Before I do, I'd like to remind everybody that we love to hear what you guys have to say during the show, whether you guys have a hot take, whether you guys have a burning question. We're all ears. And if you really want your comment or question to get noticed, then I recommend using Super Chat. You just click on the $ below the chat box and you can send in your comments and or donations that way. Super Chat's not really your thing, then you can always use the link displayed below the ticker on every show segment, gsmcspodcast.net, and you can send in your comments and or donations that way. It really helped the show. make it much more interactive between myself and you guys. So, with that out of the way, let's go ahead and get into this second segment, which is going to be talking about Aaron Rodgers and the Jets. So, as we know, the Jets, they are a complete train wreck. They did not play this week. They had a bye week, and it's just been terrible despite getting Aaron Rodgers and, getting Devontae Adams and getting all of these former Green Bay wide receivers that were more or less competent with Aaron Rodgers. Every Jets fan and everybody who is an Aaron Rodgers fan, they expected some great things for the Jets, and only to be disappointed with this awful season that they've had. And I'm just gonna say it right now. The Jets, they had a better record at this point in the season with Zach Wilson than they did with Aaron Rodgers, and that is really saying a lot because, as Jets fans know, and I'm sure most of the NFL knows, Zach Wilson is not a competent quarterback, and he's actually awful at quarterback. And he was a big reason why the Jets would lose their games, because they would lack quarterback play, and they wouldn't have a quarterback that would have the ability to make these important throws. He'd throw a lot of interceptions, he'd turn the ball over. He was basically Daniel Jones just on the Jets. And it was hard. It was really difficult for a lot of Jets fans. And now, once they were able to acquire Aaron Rodgers, they thought that all of their problems would be lifted. In the first season with Aaron Rodgers, he tore his ACL, as we know, literally in the first possession of the game, and he was out for the whole season. So there goes one season with Aaron, and now this next season with Aaron, where they have a fresh start, everyone expected great things from him, and they started out incredibly slow. Actually, they started out worse than when they had Zach Wilson on the squad, and then the head coach ended up getting fired. Whichever reason might it be, no idea, but there are rumors that maybe Aaron Rodgers was the reason why he got fired. Then there were other rumors coming in that the owner wanted Aaron Rodgers to get benched, but the coach said no, and he ended up getting fired a few weeks after. And, all of this drama coming in from the Jets, and then they ended up getting Devontae Adams, who is a fantastic wide receiver. And he also wanted to leave the Raiders because he didn't think he had a good shot of winning when he was on the Raiders. And still, the Jets only have one win to show for it since getting Devontae Adams, which is very, very bad. And it's like all of the problems that the Jets thought that they had last season, it's not like they don't have problems this season. In fact, you could argue that they have even more problems this season than when they did with Zach Wilson, because they played phenomenal defense with Zach Wilson at quarterback. They had a great receiving core. They had a great DB core, but ever since Aaron Rodgers took the helm, it's like everything else on the Jets squad ultimately ended up getting worse. Like, the O-line was already bad, but they don't give Rodgers enough time to, throw the ball at times. The receivers, for some reason, ended up getting a little bit worse. And the corners, especially Sauce Gardner, have also gotten a little bit worse. And there were several instances. I remember against the Colts, when the Jets played against the Colts, before they played that game, Sauce Gardner was talking about how everyone knows how to tackle, and little does he know that to end the game, he is unable to make a tackle, and that results in the Colts scoring a game-winning touchdown. And that's just a backbreaker, because it's like he has this, I don't want to say ego, because, like, again, I don't really think NFL players have ego. I think they have confidence, but not really trying to pay attention to tackling and not thinking that is a necessity in the game of football is completely egregious, because the two most underrated things that you need to win football games are blocking and tackling. If you're unable to tackle, then more often than not, you're unable to win these football games. And the fact that he didn't take tackling all that seriously is a little bit concerning because, and lo and behold, it was the reason why the Jets ended up losing. Special teams has also been a little bit bad. The kicker missed a lot of field goals that if he would have connected on, probably would have ended up winning the game winning several games for the Jets. And it's just, everything is just bad. Everything is just worse. And Aaron Rodgers knows it. I guess Aaron thought that this was going to be something easy. I don't know what it is, but Rodgers, he still wants to play football in 2025, but he does not want to play for the Jets. And in my opinion, this is like, how should I say? I don't want to say diva behavior, but like it really does feel like it is, because it's like he joins the Jets because he wants to get out of Green Bay and he wants to try and win some more. Obviously, that's why he joined the Jets, because he saw that everything seemed to be right for the Jets, and all that the Jets needed was a star quarterback to get them over the top, right? He joined the Jets knowing this. Obviously, we can't really say anything about him getting injured at the start of the season, because that would just be unfair. But for this season, everything that could go wrong for the Jets did go wrong. They started out a little, like the first few games, they started out all right. Aaron started out all right. But the majority of these games ended in nothing but disappointment. And ultimately, being the kind of player that he is, he would attract other stars. He attracted some of the Packers receivers as well as Davante Adams. And he even went on a show with like showing off that he ended up getting it was the Pat McAfee show, I think it was, where he ended up going on a call with Pat McAfee, and live on the podcast, Davante Adams was already in the room after reports were going around that Davante Adams ended up getting traded over to the Jets. And it was like, okay, now that he has his star wide receiver, they should be winning games, right? That's not the case at all. They ended up continuing to lose. And it's just, everybody has gotten fired so far. The head coach ended up getting fired after 5 games. Joe Douglas ended up getting fired. Joe Douglas deserved to get fired, honestly. And they're going to need to find replacements for both of these guys. And now that, this entire season has been a train wreck for the Jets, Aaron wants to leave. It's like, it seems a little bit self-centered, in my opinion. Like, maybe it's just me. Let me know in the comments what you guys think. But, like, it's so weird. Like, you go to a spot that you wanted to go to because you wanted to try and fix the franchise. And then the franchise continues to mess up, mainly because of, the team around you not being nearly as good as they were previously. And I'm also going to point out that Aaron, while I will say he's been solid, he hasn't been the same caliber player that he was on Green Bay. And I mean, he's nowhere near the MVP caliber player that he was after he won back-to-back MVPs with the Packers. And he also has yet to have a 300 passing yard game this season. So I'm not going to say that Aaron Rodgers is exempt from this criticism, because his play in some of these games has also been a big reason why the Jets haven't been able to win a couple more games. And I will say that there are other problems elsewhere, but he is also a problem with this team. And now he wants to leave it because it's a train wreck. Like, that just seems very self-centered to me. Let me know in the comments what you guys think. And it makes him, like, there were speculations and there are talks that he's a little bit of a diva. This really accentuates those kinds of conversations. But that's just me. And, I mean, speaking for Jets fans and what they've had to deal with in this season, not only do I feel their pain, but I don't think they want Aaron as their quarterback anymore. So it seems like the feeling is mutual between between the franchise and between the quarterback. It doesn't seem like I haven't really spoken to many Jets fans who want Aaron Rodgers to still be their quarterback. And if they end up buying him out, I don't know if that's what they're going to do, but it's really like, I'm not sure what other options they have, but this is just unbelievable. This is really, really bad. It's incredible how the Jets, they still managed to mess up this season despite having in my opinion, one of the best quarterbacks in NFL history, and one of the most talented quarterbacks in NFL history by far as well. But that's all that I have for this second segment. So now we're going to go ahead and go into the third segment where I recap all of the NFL games that took place on Sunday. There were a lot of upsets. I'm not going to really spend much time on all of them individually as much as I would like. I might do that later on in future segments, but for now, I'm just going to recap the scores and the best players for each and every single team that is played on Sunday, and I'll be right back after this short break, so be sure to stay tuned if you guys are interested.
Looking for your daily fix of sports talk without having to pay for it? GSMC Sports Network is available on YouTube. Just search GSMC Sports Network. Get your fix of daily sports talk shows on YouTube, absolutely free. NFL, college football, NBA, MLB, MMA, UFC, fantasy football, and so much more. GSMC Sports Network has shows running all day long, with new sports shows starting every 2 hours. Just like on your favorite cable sports channel, except GSMC Sports Network is absolutely free. Just search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube to catch one of your new favorite shows, like the GSMC College Football Podcast, Chip Shot Football Podcast, Hoops and Heels Women's Sports Podcast, GSMC Basketball Podcast, and so many more. Check it out for yourself. GSMC Sports Network, now available on YouTube absolutely free. Search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube right now.
And we are back with the third segment of the GSMC Sports Podcast presented by the GSMC Sports Network. And in this third segment, we're going to be doing a quick recap of all of the NFL games that took place on Sunday. And I already did the Sunday night game between the Eagles and the Rams. I'm not really going to go that much in depth like I did in that first segment, but I will try to do my best given the time that we have. And in the future, I'll most likely go a little bit more in depth with some of these games that ended up taking place. But yeah, let's go ahead. Let's dive right in. You know what? We're gonna dive right into the worst game that I had to watch yesterday, which was the Giants absolutely getting destroyed by the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. It was not a pretty game. The Giants did not score until the fourth quarter, so a garbage time touchdown was what they scored. Fantastic. I did not expect, Tommy DeVito to win this game, and, if Daniel Jones was in this game, I didn't expect us to win this game either. There's really no competent quarterback that the Giants have, which is honestly, I'm a bit sad that they ended up getting owned like this, but in the end, it should be good. It should be a good thing, because now the Giants, they have the second overall pick in this draft, and the Giants can use it on Shedeur Sanders, or they can use it on Cam Ward, whichever one of those players, it doesn't matter. I would not mind if either one of those quarterbacks was the quarterback that they ended up drafting. And there have been talks that Brian Daboll might get fired after this season, given, how this team really, it seems like he's lost the locker room. Mainly because, Malik Neighbors, he went in a post-game conference, not really a conference, but in a post-game interview, he said that the quarterback is not the problem, and, in reference to Daniel Jones, getting cut from the roster, and it would seem like Brian Daboll has lost the locker room. And when a coach loses the locker room, that's usually like the death sentence for the team, and that's usually a death sentence for his job. I hope that the Giants don't fire Daboll, and I hope they give him one more chance with a quarterback that's actually competent, even though I do know that quarterback is not the only flaw that this team has, but still it was a very, very major flaw, and it still is a major flaw. But again, Tommy DeVito, he did not really play well in this game. I didn't really expect him to play well, and I hope that they don't win a couple of games, mainly because that would affect their draft stock. But aside from that, we can talking about the Bucks. Baker Mayfield completed 24 of his 30 passes, threw for 294 yards in this game. He did not throw a touchdown, but he did not throw an interception either. He did run for a touchdown. In fact, all of the touchdowns that the Buccaneers scored were on the ground. Bucky Irving ended with a touchdown. Rashad White also ended with a touchdown. As I said before, Baker Mayfield ended with a touchdown. And Sean Tucker also ended with a touchdown in this game. Mike Evans, in his return, ended with 68 receiving yards on 5 receptions. So, fantastic play coming in from Mike Evans. He is going to need a lot more receptions and yards after the catch if he wants to maintain his 1,000 receiving yard streak every single season. Because as we know, Mike Evans, ever since every single year that he's been on the Bucs and every single year that he's been in the NFL, he has had 1,000 receiving yards or more. And one of the most underrated, most consistent wide receivers in the entire NFL. No question about that. But this was just, a classic spanking coming in from the Bucs, and a classic spanking that the Giants had to take against the Bucs. So not really much that needs to be said about this. Vikings going up against the Bears. This game was incredibly hectic. The Bears, they just find several ways to lose. They find almost every single way to lose. It's unbelievable. So I'm not really going to talk about the first 3 quarters of this game because we won't have time, but it was really bad for Chicago. They were down 24-10. However, in the fourth quarter, a miracle happened. The Vikings, they turned the ball over on downs. Then Chicago answered with a 10-play touchdown drive. Then Minnesota answered that with a field goal. And then the Bears, they answered that with a touchdown drive of their own to make the score 27-24. They needed an onside kick recovery in order to win this game or tie the game. And they did. They ended up recovering an onside kick. I think that was like the first time I've ever seen an onside kick recovered with these new rules that you have to tell the other team that you're going to do an onside kick. And spoiler alert, this was not the only onside kick that was recovered. And actually, wait, no, it was. Excuse me. But then to end the game, they ended up, to end regulation, they ended up taking a field goal to make the score tie 27-27. So after all that, the Bears went 3-and-out. And then the Vikings quickly jotted down the field and scored a game-winning field goal to win the game. So after all of that, they had a touchdown that was answered with a field goal. Then they scored a touchdown, and then they got the ball back, and then they scored on a field goal, and just to go 3-and-out in overtime and lose the game. That is just tragic for Bears fans. That's like they find new ways to lose. But that's really all she wrote in this game. All the excitement happened in the fourth quarter. Lions, they went up against the Colts. The Colts, they got destroyed 24-6. And Anthony Richardson, he did not play well in this matchup at all. A big reason why they ended up losing. The Lions, they might be the best team in the entire NFL right now. Jahmyr Gibbs ended the game with 2 rushing touchdowns along with 90 yards. And David Montgomery ended the game with 37 rushing yards, but he did accumulate a touchdown. Jared Goff did not turn into Jared Goof in this game. He threw for 269 yards, no touchdowns, no interceptions. And really, the whole team, the game was really never close in this one. Like, there was no expectation that the Colts would end up winning. Even after they went up 3-0 in the first quarter, the Lions, they just said, touchdown, touchdown. Then they responded with another touchdown in the third, and that was all she wrote. Now, you guys might notice that I'm not wearing my cowboy hat today. That is because the Cowboys somehow ended up winning this game. I am incredibly mad at the Commanders for letting them win and giving them a spark, giving them some confidence. I'm very upset. Jaden Daniels threw 2 interceptions. Bad Jaden, bad. He did throw 2 touchdowns, though, and he did also run for a touchdown in this game. So, scoring basically all of the touchdowns for the Commanders is not a bad thing. But again, 2 interceptions, no good. Now, similar to the Vikings and the Bears game, the fourth quarter in this game was very hectic. Now, for some reason, special teams for the Cowboys, they were very special today. They had a field goal blocked. Then the Commanders, they answered with a field goal. Then the Cowboys missed a field goal, but then the Commanders missed a field goal. Then the Cowboys fumbled, so already a very ugly first quarter. Then in the second quarter, both teams ended up punting 4 times. Washington punt, Cowboys punt, Washington punt, Cowboys punt. Then Washington threw an interception, and it was back to punting. The Cowboys punted. The Commanders punted. Then the Cowboys finally made a field goal to end the half 3-3. Very boring first half. And then the second half started. Washington opened up with a touchdown, but they missed the extra point. Then Dallas ended up scoring a touchdown, and they made the extra point. Then both teams ended up punting, and then the fourth quarter started, where the punt-off continued. The Cowboys punted, then Washington punted, then the Cowboys ended up taking a field goal, and they made it. Then the Commanders fumbled the ball away, which the Cowboys answered with a touchdown. Then the Commanders finally got their act together, and they answered back with a touchdown, making the score 20-17. Then the Cowboys ended up returning they returned a kickoff all the way for a touchdown, which the Commanders answered with a field goal. Then the Cowboys had to punt, and then the Commanders scored a touchdown on their what was expected to be the final play. There was only 12 seconds left. But, of course, the kicker ended up missing another field goal. So, just miss after miss after miss. And then they attempted to onside kick because you need to in order to win. And then the Cowboys returned that for a touchdown as well. And then the Commanders ended the game with another interception. So, a very, very weird game, a very odd game. Probably the most Cowboys win you'll ever see. And, again, that was just a very odd game. The Chiefs, they ended up beating the Panthers. Bryce Young, he did play really competent in this one and actually held his own against Patrick Mahomes. The score was 30-27. He ended with 1 passing touchdown, 263 yards. The Patrick Mahomes finally looked like Patrick Mahomes in this game, throwing 269 yards and 3 touchdowns with no interceptions. And again, he just looked like Patrick Mahomes in this game. And the Chiefs, they had the ball to close out the game. The score was tied 27-27. And when Mahomes has the ball in the final quarter, you already know that you're going to lose. Now, the Titans, they ended up stunning the Texans. I thought the Texans were going to win in this game. Speaking of which, I completely forgot my predictions to mention them. I thought the Bucs were going to win. They won. The Vikings were going to win. They won. The Lions, they won. I thought the Commanders were going to win, but the Cowboys, they shocked me. I knew the Chiefs were going to win against the Panthers. However, the game was really close. The Titans, I thought the Texans were going to beat the Titans, but the Texans ended up messing up, mainly because of C.J. Stroud throwing 2 interceptions in this game. And Will Levis actually had a solid game, 2 touchdowns, 1 interception with a QBR of 123. And really just, you could make an argument that he did outplay C.J. Stroud in this game, which is a little bit disappointing, like for C.J. Stroud, because I really do like me some C.J. Stroud. Now, I have to move a little bit quickly because I am running out of time. The Dolphins, they ended up beating the Pats. I expected them to do that. The Tua Tagovailoa seems to be back and playing way better than, actually not even way better, just as good as we usually see him play. 317 passing yards, 4 touchdowns, and Jalen Waddle ended with 144 yards. Tyreek Hill, he has not been playing good at all this season. And Jonnu Smith, he ended with 87 yards and a touchdown as well. And, this game was really never close. I mean, the Dolphins, they're going to be the Dolphins with Tua healthy and with all the weapons that they have. The Broncos, they ended up beating the Raiders 29-19. I picked the Broncos to win this one. And Bo Nix has been playing very well so far. 2 touchdowns, 273 passing yards in this game. Meanwhile, the Raiders, Gardner Minshew has been ruled out for the season. And he did end the game with 230 passing yards, 1 touchdown, and 1 interception. The Packers, I thought the Niners were going to continue with their trend of beating the Packers, but I was wrong. Packers ended up destroying them 38-10. Jordan Love threw 2 touchdowns, and Josh Jacobs ended up helping everyone's fantasy team with 106 rushing yards and 3 rushing touchdowns. There was no Brock Purdy in this game, but really McCaffrey, he did not play well in this game either, so there was really nothing that the Niners would have been able to do. So that was another upset that I did not expect. The Cardinals ended up losing to the Seahawks in another Bird Bowl game. The Seahawks, they won 16-6. Geno Smith threw a touchdown. He also threw an interception. Kyler Murray, I guess he played a little bit too much Call of Duty in the bye week, and he ended up throwing an interception and threw for 285 yards. Again, that interception was costly. And that was all she wrote for this game. And for the predictions against the Ravens and the Chargers, that's the game that's going to happen later on tonight. I'm pretty sure I picked the Ravens to win this one. So that's all that I have for the NFL and the recap. So now we're going to shift our focus to NBA basketball and do a quick weekend recap of all of the games that took place. So I'll be right back after this short break. Be sure to stay tuned.
For the best and latest podcasts available anywhere, go to the Poodcast app on your cell phone and type in GSMC to access free content-rich podcasts on health and wellness, book reviews, sports, entertainment, relationships, social media, movies, technology, finance, and even weird news. Subscribe and download the GSMC Podcast Network's family of shows, available everywhere podcasts are found.
And we are back with the 4th segment of the GSMC Sports Podcast presented by the GSMC Sports Network. And in this 4th segment, I'm going to do a quick recap of all of the NBA games that took place over the weekend. We're going to start right now because I am running low on some time. The Nets, they matched up against the 76ers. I thought the Nets were going to win because the 76ers most likely were not going to have Joel Embiid. They did not have Joel Embiid. They did not have Paul George either. They did have Tyrese Maxey, and they did have Jared McCain. McCain ended with 30 points, is making a very solid conversation of being put in the Rookie of the Year, right? Because, not many rookies are really playing all that well. He has been playing phenomenally in these last few games. Maxey, he ended with 26 points. He did go 11 for 17, but again, Jared McCain was really the big story in this game. Cam Johnson ended with 37 points and still ended up suffering a loss. Cam Thomas ended with 18 and was 6 for 15. This was Ben Simmons' return to Philly, and he had 2 points. 2! He also ended with 4 rebounds and 4 assists as well. This man, Ben Simmons, he went 1 for 4 on layups. I saw him miss a wide-open layup in one of the quarters of play. He also missed another wide-open layup, and then he missed a rather contested layup, but again, we're used to seeing him make those kinds of layups. He was missing every single layup on the court. I don't know how he still has a job. He's absolutely awful. I cannot stand Ben Simmons, but that's the end of that. So I was already wrong. And then the Warriors, they matched up against the Pelicans. I was right about this one. They ended up winning 112-108. Steph Curry did not play well in this one, but they don't really need his production. Of course they don't, because the Warriors somehow are always just a competent team, with Andrew Wiggins dropping 30 points out of nowhere. And that was really the only production that they needed, because the Pelicans, they did not have any of their star players aside from Brandon Ingram, who ended with just 18 points and shot 7 for 16. So again, not really an outcome that I expected, an outcome that we all expected. Now, the Nuggets, they ended up losing to the Dallas Mavericks. That was an outcome I did not expect. Despite Jokic dropping 33, 17, and 10, they still ended up losing with a shorthanded Mavericks because Luka is going to be out for a couple of games, and they still ended up losing. I don't get it. Klay Thompson ended the game with 0 points, 0 for 8, 0 for 4, and they still won. I don't get it. I genuinely don't. But I think now it's safe to say that Klay Thompson is washed. And they had Najee Marshall, who had 26 points. PJ Washington, who had 22 points. But again, 0 for 8. If this was Carmelo Anthony, he would get cut immediately. And let's see. No one really performed all that well on the Nuggets. I mean, Michael Porter Jr. had 17 points. Jamal Murray had 14 and 11. But of course, unless they're going up against the Lakers, more on that later, the team does not play well. And Celtics, they ended up destroying the Wizards on Friday. Jaylen Brown ended with 31 points and 11 rebounds. Jason Tatum had 16, 9, and 8. And really, obviously, against the Wizards, this game was not really going to be close. I had the Celtics winning in this one. And the Bucks, they ended up beating the Pacers. I don't think I picked the Bucks to win in this one. I haven't really been all that confident with this team. But again, like I said, this was a game that I wouldn't mind getting wrong because, the Pacers, they have awful defense. And Giannis made sure that they knew that they had awful defense, dropping a 37-point triple-double with 10 rebounds and 11 assists. Damian Lillard ended with 24 points and 13 assists as well. And the bench actually had some solid production from Gary Trent with 18, Bobby Portis with 17. And really, this game was just a train wreck for Indiana. Halliburton, he ended with 18 points and 9 assists because, that's Tyrese Halliburton for you. But again, Giannis dropping 37 on a triple-double is ridiculous. Houston, they ended up beating the Trailblazers. I thought that Houston was going to win, and I ended up being proved right. They won 116-88. And let's see. Dylan Brooks, he ended up dropping 28 points out of nowhere. And the Blazers, they really did not have much of an answer for that. The Hawks, they ended up losing to the Bulls. I thought the Hawks were going to win mainly because they cannot really stray too far from a 500 record. But the Bulls, the starting lineup, almost everyone on the starting lineup had around 20 points or more. Trae Young outplayed Tyrese Halliburton again, 25 points with 13 assists. He did shoot 8 for 18 and 1 for 8 from 3. But again, 25 points and a double-double with that is a double-double. The Clippers, they ended up beating the Kings. I don't know which team I picked in this one. I'm pretty sure I picked the Kings, and I ended up getting that wrong, of course, because the Clippers, they're just clipping away at the competition. De'Aaron Fox ended with 29 points, 7 rebounds, 7 assists. Sabonis ended with 24 points and 15 rebounds. Kevin Huerter ended with 0. And so, not a really good day with predictions so far. Definitely not. And then on Saturday, the Knicks disappointed me yet again. The Knicks ended up losing 106-121 to one of the worst teams in the NBA, the Utah Jazz. So, very disappointing right there. Already just taking another L in the predictions. And just because we're running out of time, I'm going to speed through a little bit of these. The Spurs, they ended up beating the Warriors, another team that disappointed me because I thought the Warriors were going to end up winning. Victor had 25 points, 9 assists, and 7 rebounds. Harrison Barnes had 22 points in his revenge game against this team. Steph Curry only had 14 points. He's been playing awful, and, I don't know what's going on with Steph right now. The Nuggets, of course, they beat the Lakers because they just play well against the Lakers. They only play well against the Lakers, it seems like. Anthony Davis ended with 14 points and 10 rebounds, so a very lackluster performance coming in from him, especially going 6 for 19 from the field. LeBron ended with 18, with 7 assists and 6 rebounds and 3 steals. The Nuggets ended this game on a 50-17 run, which is ridiculous. Again, I have no idea how they do this against the Lakers. They just go on these ridiculous shooting splits and just own them. I don't understand I don't know what it is. I genuinely do not know what it is, but they shoot historically well against these Lakers. They play historically well against these Lakers. It does not make any sense. Jokic ended with 34 and 13. Michael Porter ended with 24 and 11. Jamal Murray did not turn into Michael Jordan in this game, but he still ended with 14 points and 5 for 12 from the field. But again, the way that this team ended up going on a run, by the way, Russell Westbrook ended with 14 points, 6 for 10 from the field, and 11 assists. I don't know how they go on this run against the Lakers. I don't know how they do that, but they just do it. It's ridiculous. I cannot stand it because it's only against the Lakers. They only play this ridiculously well against LeBron and against LA. I don't know what's in the water for them, but it's they're the Lakers' kryptonite, and it does not make any sense. The Magic, they ended up beating the Pistons, an outcome that I expected. Actually, I don't think I expected that now that I think about that. I'm pretty sure I picked the Pistons to win in this one, but Franz Wagner, he dropped 30 and said, your prediction is wrong. And that was really all she wrote, because that was the best player on the court for the Magic. The Blazers, they ended up beating Houston in the next matchup that they ended up playing. Yes, they played back-to-back games against each other in Houston. And Fernie Simmons, he ended with 25 points, and Jeremy Grant ended with 22, and Shaedon Sharpe ended with 24. Meanwhile, they did not have a solid performance coming in from Dillon Brooks, which was a big reason why they ended up losing. And, yeah. The Bucks, they ended up beating the Charlotte Hornets, despite LaMelo Ball dropping 50 points and 10 assists. This was a career high for Melo. He had 40 points in the second half, and Brandon Miller ended with 32 points and 11 rebounds. Somehow this wasn't enough to beat the Bucks, with Giannis scoring 32 points, 11 rebounds, and Damian Lillard dropping 31 points. I don't know what LaMelo Ball is expected to do. I mean, there's also rumors that he's going to get traded to the Clippers, or that the Clippers are going to go ahead and pick him up. But, I mean, 50 points and 40 of them coming in the second half, that is incredible. He did shoot 17 for 38 from the field, however, that's a lot of shots. But again, 50 points is 50 points. Then the Grizzlies, they ended up beating the Bulls. I'm pretty sure I predicted that. The Bulls, they ended up losing 142 to 131. Scottie Pippen Jr. ended with 30 points and 10 assists. And for the Bulls side, Zach LaVine ended with 29 points. Now, Sunday's games, which were games that nobody really paid attention to, Heat ended up taking the game into overtime and beating the Mavericks 123 to 118. And the Mavericks, they finally got some sort of production from Klay Thompson with 15 points. And he did go 5 for 12 from the field, however. Just an awful shooter now. Kyrie Irving, 27 points, 6 assists, and 4 rebounds. But again, wasn't enough for the Heat or Jimmy Butler, who had a random 33-point game with 9 rebounds and 6 assists. I say random because he usually doesn't do this, and he usually saves this until the postseason. Kings, they ended up losing again, this time to the Brooklyn Nets. I did not expect the Nets to win this one. Cam Thomas ended with 34 points. And on the Kings side, De'Aaron Fox ended with 31 and still ended up losing. The Celtics, they beat the Timberwolves. Not really shocked at that result either. The Jason Tatum ended with 26 points. Jaylen Brown ended with 29 points, because of course he did. Anthony Edwards ended with 28. Randall ended with 23. Rudy Gobert ended with 10 points and 20 rebounds. Pacers, they made short work of the Wizards. Of course they did. Siakam ended with 22. And on Washington's side, no one really played well. I mean, Alexander Czar finally had a good game, 17 points and 14 rebounds. But, been very lackluster as the second overall pick in the entire draft. Clippers, they destroyed the 76ers because it's almost like they're missing their MVP caliber center in Joel Embiid, who just does not want to play for some reason. I don't know what's going on over there, but just absolutely awful. James Harden, 23 points, 8 assists. Zubac, 16 and 12. And Derrick Jones Jr., 18 points. And on the Sixers side, McCain ended with 18 points. Really the only bright spot for this Sixers team, despite the fact that he went 3 for 15. And he did make 10 free throws out of the 12 he took, really taking after Joel Embiid there. But again, shorthanded 76ers. And the Cavs, they ended up beating the Raptors. They're 17-1 now. They won 122 to 108 with the help of Donovan Mitchell and his 26 points, and Jared Allen with his 23 points and 13 rebounds. So that's really all that I have to say on this recap. Also, Jacob Poeltl ended with 12 points and 19 rebounds, and Grady Dick ended with 18. Scotty Barnes is finally back, and he ended the game with 18 points, 7 rebounds, and 7 assists. So really good for fantasy. But that's it for the fourth segment. So now we're going to go into the fifth segment, where we look at the NBA power rankings that were just released, like literally just released. And I will be right back after this short break, so be sure to stay tuned. And we are back with the fifth and the final segment of the GSMC Sports Podcast presented by the GSMC Sports Network. And in this fifth segment, we are going to go ahead and look at NBA's power rankings. And we're going to do that a little bit quicker than usual because we are a little bit low on time. And they released at the time I started the show, they released an hour ago. So I guess that's 2 hours ago. And I'm just going to pull them up. Give me 1 second real quick while I pull these up. And let me see. There we go. All right. So you guys can see the screen. And I didn't look at these. This has been on this page for the longest time. I'm going to say that the Celtics are back up at number 1 because they honestly, they should be back at number 1. And yeah, they are. Of course they are. As we know, the Celtics, they are just the team to beat in the Eastern Conference, and they're the team to beat in the entirety of the NBA. And they got 2 big wins over the weekend. And, well, one win you could argue was bigger than the other. Beating the Wizards wasn't really that big of a deal, but beating the Timberwolves, you can argue that was a big deal. The game was close, but of course they ended up coming out on top. And the Cavs, the minute they ended up losing a game, I had a feeling that they were going to be dropped all the way down to maybe second or third, but being ranked second makes total sense. Again, they have the best record in the NBA right now with only 1 loss, and after that 1 loss to the Boston Celtics, they continue to win. It makes total sense that the Celtics are ranked above the Cavs because they beat the Cavs, so I have really no problem with them dropping down to the 2 spot, despite the fact that they're still able to win, just not against the Celtics, who have seemed to claim their spot as the best team in the Eastern Conference without being the best team in the Eastern Conference, because as we know, the record difference, 17-1, that's better than 14-3, but regardless, the Celtics, they were able to do that. They were able to beat the only undefeated team. They deserve to be at number 1. Then Golden State, they dropped to number 2. Makes total sense. As we know, they ended up losing to the Spurs over the weekend. And, I mean, even if they did not lose to the Spurs, I would not put this team over Cleveland right now based off of team record and based off of Steph's overall performance. And despite this, however, the Warriors, they've been very competent as a team, which is something that I did not expect. They are number 1 in the Western Conference right now. They beat the Pelicans, they beat the Hawks, they beat the Clippers, they lost to the Clippers. So, really, 2 bad losses over last week, and 2 losses that really shouldn't have happened, and that's a big reason why they dropped from 2 to 3. Now, in my opinion, I don't think they're better than the Thunder, because the Thunder, they are suffering from injuries. In fact, they're suffering from a lot of them. They did not play over this weekend, which does not really help their cause in these power ranking debates. So that's probably why they did not move from their number 4 spot, which is, below the Warriors. But again, this team is incredibly injured. Despite the fact that they've been injured, they have still been able to win several games. So I don't really think that they should be ranked below the Warriors. I think the Thunder are a much better team than the Warriors. And the fact that they're still able to win despite running this small ball lineup most of the time, I still think, when they're healthy, they are a better team than Golden State. But, obviously, I can't really speak on that now because it's all hypothetical and just, my speculations just on how this team has been playing. But having them at 4, now I can't really complain about that. I would just put them at 3. Now, Houston, they stay at 5, respectfully so. They did have 1 bad loss over the weekend against the Blazers after beating the Blazers. But again, 12-6 record right now. And they hold the 3rd spot in the Western Conference. This is literally 2016. It's literally 2016 with the top teams in each of the conferences. The Cavs are number 1, Celtics are number 2, similar to 2016 when the Cavs and the Celtics, they ruled the Eastern Conference. And the Golden State Warriors, they are the best team, similar to how they were the best team in 2016, as well as in 2017 and 18. And Houston, they were up there as well back then. And the Thunder in 2016, with Kevin Durant and Russell Westbrook, they were also up there as one of the better teams. So it's really weird how this season's been playing out so far. The Dallas Mavericks, they move up to number 7 despite the fact that they ended up losing a couple of games. And a big reason for that is because they were able to win against the Denver Nuggets despite not having Luka Doncic and also beating OKC. So I guess it makes a little bit of sense. I would not have put them at number 6. I would have put the Lakers there, but again, the Lakers did suffer 2 really bad losses over the weekend, mainly one to Denver, and then the other one to the Orlando Magic without Paolo Banchero. So Denver being ranked over LA, it makes sense. They move up all the way to 7, despite the fact that they did end up losing a couple games last week. But again, this is the Denver Nuggets. Now, I think they get a little bit too much credit for beating the Lakers because it's like they just play unbelievable basketball against them, but they should be ranked over the Lakers. Now, Clippers, they should not be ranked over the Lakers. I don't know why they're ranked over them, but again, being 11-7 without Kawhi Leonard is very impressive. And they do have one more win than the Lakers right now, but they also have one more loss against the Lakers right now. So Orlando Magic being ranked over the Lakers right now, I guess that makes sense as well, mainly because the Lakers ended up losing to them. But jumping all the way from 14 to 9, I think that's a bit much. Memphis, they stay at 10. I don't think the Lakers are worse than the Memphis Grizzlies. I think the Lakers are better than them. But again, they also did not have Ja Morant for a couple of games. So they also did not have Ja Morant against the Bulls in this one, but they still were able to win. So I guess that makes a little bit of sense. The Knicks being at number 11, that makes some sense, jumping all the way up from 13 to 11. They've been playing really, really well recently, aside from that one loss to the Jazz, which just was not good. They're going to play the Nuggets later on tonight at 9 o'clock. They did beat the Suns, although it was without Kevin Durant. They beat the Wizards and they beat the Nets twice, but again, all of that is taken with a grain of salt considering how they ended up losing to the Jazz later on. Now, the Lakers, they dropped from 9 all the way down to 12. Not a really bad spot for them, but again, I don't think that the Grizzlies should be over them. I also don't think that the Clippers should be over them. I think they'd sort of jump the gun with those rankings, but hindsight is 2020. Spurs, they move all the way up from 19 to 13. I think that's a little bit premature, but again, they did just beat the Warriors. So right now they're above 500 team for a first time in a while. Victor, he has not been, shooting the ball very well, but the team has been able to get it done. Chris Paul, the Chris Paul effect is real. Last year, this team would have been one of the worst in the NBA, but with Chris Paul on the roster, they actually have a winning record, and it really shows just the value that Chris Paul brings to the roster. Minnesota, they drop all the way down to 14 after being 6. That makes a lot of sense. I was expecting them to be dropped down a lot. The Bucks, they move all the way up 10 spots. I guess that was bound to happen given the fact that they were winning a couple of games now, and it doesn't seem like the team is playing nearly as bad as they were in the beginning of the season. But again, they still have Doc Rivers and Darvin Ham as their coach. They are not going to do anything in the postseason. Phoenix, they moved down from 12 to 16, which makes sense because, again, they don't have Kevin Durant, and when you don't have Kevin Durant, your team is going to be worse. The Miami Heat, they end up moving up one spot a little bit. No, actually, you know what? Not really much that I need to say about that. Kings, they move down. Makes sense. They've suffered from disappointing losses. The Pacers, they move down as well. Again, another team that's suffered disappointing losses. Portland moves up. They've had some stunning victories, so that makes sense why they move up. The Nets, they stay where they are. Makes total sense as well. The Bulls, they move up a little bit by winning a couple of surprising games, so that also makes a little bit of sense. Hawks, they move down. Makes sense because they lost in some disappointments. Charlotte, they move down because while LaMelo's been playing very well, the team has still ended up losing. The Pistons, they move down from 17 to 25. I knew that was going to happen eventually. This Pistons team is not as good as they think they are, and the record, it's not really good, but again, anything is better than the record that they had last year. And the Raptors, they move up 26 from 28. That makes sense. Philly, they should still be one of the worst teams in the NBA. They should be at number 29 or at number 30. But again, Washington, they hold that 30 spot. They're going to hold that 30 spot. And the Pelicans, moving them at 29, I guess that makes a little bit of sense, but I would have much rather them be ranked below the Jazz. But really, that's all that I have to say for the power rankings. More or less, they make sense, but I know this isn't going to be how the league looks towards the end of the season. Not sure about the 76ers, though. I'm pretty sure they're going to stay where they are. But that's all that I have for this fifth segment. That's it for the show. Thank you so much for tuning in to the GSMC Sports Podcast presented by the GSMC Sports Network. Your support means a lot to us, so remember to subscribe to the show, leave a positive review. It really does make a difference. We also invite you to follow us on Facebook, Twitter, TikTok, and Instagram for more content and updates. As usual, we love to hear what you guys have to say during the show, whether you guys have a hot take, whether you guys have a burning question, or anything that you've just been dying to share. We're all ears. You can use Super Chat. You just click on the $ below the chat box, or you can use the link displayed below the ticker to send in your comments and or donations that way. gsmcpodcast.net is the link below every single ticker on every show segment. Really helps the show, makes it much more interactive between myself and you guys. That's all that I really have today on this final segment. Thank you so much for tuning in, and that's all that I have on this podcast. I am your host, Nelson, and as always, take care.
Let's go. I wake up to a little bit of drool on my pillow, feel like it's gonna be a bad day. Yeah, I'm tired of shit, and the coffee ain't hit yet, damn, ain't that great.